I was introduced to the genre, to romance, as a young adult myself, reading teen romances. It's strange that those books stay with me longer than the adult ones that I've read as an adult. I also have two young adults. I have two teenagers, and I figured if I was ever going to write in that age category, it should be while I have them, as not just as research, but maybe they will enjoy reading my books. So I went through a period where I was reading voraciously. I think I tracked my books in 2015, and I had read over 150 romances in that year. And of course, I had always in the back of my head, I should write one day. I should write one day. And when I say write, I mean write fiction. I was always writing nonfiction. I used to be an active blogger, and I used to write for my jobs. But I always kind of in the back of my head wanted to write something. I decided, especially because of the health issues I was going through, I was like, what am I waiting for? So I just started writing. I started writing in January 2016. And I found, especially because at the time I was reading so much, I found that I was writing really fast. So I was able to get a couple of early manuscripts out quickly. They were terrible. That first book will never see the light of day. And then I finished that first book, and then I started another one, and then I started another one. And then one day I said, what about rom-com? Like, instead of the contemporary romances I was working on, I was like, I think I want to write something funny. And then once I started writing funny, I just found that that was definitely where I wanted to be. I found my voice, as we say in the writing world. And then I ended up selling that first book, and I haven't looked back since. I just keep writing. My last adult book, Accidentally Engaged, was very much about food. I intended to write it about food, but since then, and also before that, everything I've written has a lot of food in it, just because that's kind of how my brain works. And I've always turned to cooking, especially when I'm stressed or something. I always have loved learning new kinds of food and learning to cook new things and food from different cultures. So definitely I'm becoming known for being the foodie writer. But also I tend to like to write families a lot and family relationships. The relationships in my book are more than just the romance. There's always going to be a friendship relationship that might be in crisis, or a sister's relationship that might be not quite perfect and then come together at the end. And I like to include those kind of exterior relationships in it, because I think it makes the characters more well-rounded and you get to see more about their lives. When I tell somebody I'm a writer, the automatic thing people go to is that I'm writing immigrant stories or stories of pain, and I don't write that. So, oh, you're writing literature, aren't you? I'm like, no, I'm not writing. I'm not writing those kind of lit fic stories. I'm not writing painful stories. To be able to add joy to the kind of to a marginalization that most of our stories are about pain, or about the immigrant experience, or about how we fit into a new world. I'm not writing any of those stories. And I think for many people to see that kind of joy is so valuable that I don't even listen to when people say that I'm not writing serious books, because I know that there's a great deal of need for those kind of joyful stories. I do set my stories in Toronto, and I do set them in my own backyard, so the South Asian community in Toronto. And I think in some ways that has brought me readers that are looking for Canadian set romances, because there's not a lot yet. There's more, but there's still not a lot. But also just South Asian readers who want to see themselves represented and want to see their family structure represented, or want to see their kinds of friendships they have, or things like that. So I think a lot of South Asian readers like to see that familiarity of our culture on the page. But at the same time, I think a lot of my readers are not South Asians, and I think they like to have that, I mean, that window into another culture, a culture that, especially since I'm writing stories set in North America, a culture that is similar but not exactly the same as the culture they're more familiar with. Family is very important in Eastern cultures and South Asian communities, and it just makes sense to me to represent the world the way I see it, and our culture is very family-oriented, and your family relationships are as much part of your identity as your romantic relationships or your friendship relationships. You need to find that kind of like-minded people, because it's a very lonely and very confusing process otherwise. I was super, super lucky. So I joined Toronto Romance Writers even before I finished writing that terrible book. I don't know what compelled me to Google romance writing in Toronto, and I found this group. But I'm very glad I did. I joined in January, and every January Toronto Romance Writers does something called Romance 101. So every January it's very the meeting then is very beginner friendly. So that meeting taught me basically what publishing looks like, because I had no idea before that. So even before I'd finished writing that terrible book, I already knew basically what my steps were as to what would happen after I was done the book. So it kind of gave me an end goal before most authors do, and I think it was super helpful. But also just, I mean, I've met critique partners through there. I've met some of my closest friends through Toronto Romance Writers. I love working with emerging writers in Toronto, and I think having a strong group like that, we've kind of raised the bar for each other in Toronto for the romance community, and I think it's been so valuable, not just for me, but for other Toronto writers. The romance community is probably the most supportive writing community out there. I've heard from many authors, many writers at Toronto Romance Writers that don't even write romance, but they've joined Toronto Romance Writers because they said this is the best writing group in Toronto. And I think a lot of it is maybe because we're women, maybe because we're a genre that most people look down on so much that we tend to be very supportive of our own. Or maybe it's just because we're writing about love, that we tend to be generous souls that want to help each other and want to see the best in other people. But that community makes you, especially because we are writing in a genre that other people kind of look down on and that people don't think is serious books, maybe having that community makes us feel more validated, and it makes us less likely to be like secretly writing a romance. We're very openly writing a romance. We're very proud of it. And we're very visible with it too. We've been at Word on the Street with our big Toronto Romance Writer banner, and I go to writing conferences and festivals, and I proudly announce myself as a romance writer. And I think without having that community behind me that I know supports me all the time, I might not have that bravery.